Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for people to log in, and then we'll get started.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this really important session that we're having today on mental health and well-being. My name is Kim Gilliard. I'm the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Labour Relations for Chartwell Retirement Homes in Canada. I'm truly honored to be your moderator today as we embark on a journey to explore and discuss and understand the critical issues surrounding mental health. Mental health is a topic that touches the lives of everyone in some way, whether it's our own personal experience, those of our loved ones, or the broader community. Today's fast-paced, often demanding world, the importance of mental health and well-being cannot be overstated. It's essential that we create a safe space for open dialogue, to break down the stigma, and to raise awareness about the challenges individuals face with their mental health journeys. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our distinguished panel today. They've joined us and they have generously agreed to share their knowledge, their insights, and perspectives, and we're really grateful for your presence today. So our panelists, we have Jared Elias, the Director of Total Rewards at Arizona State University. We have Aaron White, EVP and Chief People Officer at Brinker International. Connor Petros, Co-Founder, Chief Client Officer at Mindria Health Corporation. And Stacy Baird, Chief People Officer at Community Medical Services. So as we go around and answer, I will ask everybody to do a little introduction about themselves. So let's embark on this journey together with our open hearts and open minds, and as we seek to understand, support, and advocate for mental health and well-being. So thank you for being here. So without further ado, let's get started on our journey. So our first question for today is, what measures have you implemented to promote resilience and mental health well-being within your organization? So who'd like to take that first?
Kim, I can kick us off. So Aaron White with Brinker International. That's both Chili's restaurants and also Maggiano's. So excited to be here today. What I would say is really over these last several years, we implemented well-being 8 years ago, and we took the 5 aspects from Gallup and their well-being, that being community, physical, mental, financial, social, and career. And what we've really done is leaned into those and really met the individual team member where they're at today and providing resources for them to have at their fingertips that can help them in their everyday life. Because we know if we can create a great team member home life, that we're going to have a great life at work. And over these last couple of years, as we could continue to look at well-being, we really have looked at a different aspect of it and bringing communities of interest. And so when I mention meeting the team member where they're at, it's creating a safe space for them to be able to meet with individuals that may be facing the same challenges that they're facing. And we've had huge success. So there's smaller groups that meet, whether that be Shades of Brinker, whether that be LGBTQ and allies. We also have our veterans community of interest. We have a group that focuses on conquering change, whether that may be a family member that's dealing with addiction, or they may have somebody in their life that they're a caregiver of. But what this has allowed them to do is have a safe space to talk about what they're going through, and then also talk about the resources that we have available, such as our Magellan, who's our ERP, that has on-site counseling to the restaurants, but it also allows them and their family members to get counseling through text or also through phone at any time. And those two things alone of just focusing on all those aspects, and then also being able to have them have an environment where they feel safe to be able to talk about the struggles that they're having, has made a huge impact.
Wow, that's great. That's fabulous. Anybody else have some different approach or something they're doing within their organization?
Well, I would love, oh, sorry, Jared. I'll just say really quick. I love, Aaron, that you really created this ERG space. We are launching an employee resource group as well. So I'm Stacy Baird, I'm the Chief People Officer for a company that is at the tip of the spear of the opioid crisis. So we deal in the intersection of substance use disorder, opioid use disorder, and mental health. I also have a podcast, HR to HX, where I talk about mental health within the space of our organizations as well as our HR teams. So really passionate about this topic. And, we came to recognize the need to have an ERG as well, to really have a resource group in a safe space. U of A, sorry, Jared, U of A did a study with us. And approximately 50% of our employee base is actually in some stage of active recovery from substance use or opioid use, because we are such an agency that's so entrenched in trauma-informed care and resilience. And so we really attract people that are in all stages of recovery. So I think being that we understand that we have such a large percentage of our population that struggles with mental health and their navigation, as well as their families based on their substance use or opioid use history, we really doubled down. We went to Lyra Health. We offer 25 visits for free for all employees, all families, whether on the medical plan or not. So all dependents and all families, we get 25 visits for free. That can be at all levels: coaching, therapy, up to psychiatry. Now that's very unique for us, given our space and what we navigate. But to the thought process of how do we really promote resilience and mental health, I wanted to jump in on what Erin said, which is I do think it really boils down to creating a safe space to destigmatize the conversation. And so I think that's why sometimes in our space, it is destigmatized, because by definition, that's what we do. And we don't hire people that have a stigma about this space. But I think for other organizations, that's a really important step. And just educating employees, this is something that I speak about as well. Do our HR teams and do our people know what to do when somebody comes to them struggling with a mental health challenge, struggling maybe with opioid use? Approximately 1% of the United States population at this point is in some way, shape, or form addicted to an opioid, based on the most recent statistics, and overdose deaths continue to climb. So I think it's just something that's relevant to all of us at this point, and something that we really have to destigmatize through education.
Absolutely, that's great. Jared, want to add in?
So, hi everybody, Jared Elias. I am the Director of Total Rewards here at ASU. It's great to be on this webinar today. And at ASU, we have an employee assistance office in which we offer faculty and staff voluntary confidential behavioral health and organizational consulting for work-related issues as well. And our team uses a brief intervention model between 1 to 5 sessions to address different issues that may affect employees or family members' well-being and productivity. So we find that this is very effective because you're not sort of passing them on to somebody else. Our employee, that office is able to really help. We have licensed counselors in that office who can really are trained to deal with those things. And being in a university environment, there's also a lot of things come up. There's a lot of items that come up on campus that could create tension, could create mental health issues. And it's just really important for us to be able to proactively, as much as we can, deal with situations as they happen.
That's right.
Kim,
Connor,
yeah, I'd be happy to add a little bit of something.
Yeah.
Nice to meet everybody. I'm Connor Petros. I'm the Chief Client Officer, also the Chief Clinical Officer for Mindera Health, a mental health technology company. And my role at my company is a bit different than the other folks on the call today. And my background perhaps different too. I'm a clinical psychologist by my training. So listening to Erin and Jared and Stacy talk about the ways that they're approaching these different types of, building these different types of programs for their staff, I think is really important, because I think to me, the hidden piece behind all of this is that it's different for different groups. It's different for different people. It's different for different companies based on where you are perhaps located, based on the types of staff or employees that you have with you. But the fact of the matter is, if you can learn a little bit about, and Stacy, I think some of your examples were really great, about what your staff needs, what they're comfortable with, what they're interested in using, and design a program around that, you're most likely to get success. I've had some really interesting conversations with folks at different types of organizations where they try to force different types of programs, whether it's an EAP, whether it's an on-site counselor or whatever. And typically those programs don't seem to be successful. So I don't know, it's just really listen to all three of those folks just give some examples about what they're doing, because it fits their groups, and what fits for Stacy might not work for Aaron's, employees, and so on and so forth. So thank you all for sharing that. I just wanted to pop in and just share that little piece.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's just incredible how you are doing that, because everybody is different. So that begs the question, kind of the second part of this first question is, how do you measure the impact of these, and what barriers have you encountered with the implementation of some of these programs in your organizations? And how have you addressed some of the issues that you've encountered? So I don't know, maybe Erin, do you want to start back at you?
Yeah, sure. So what I would tell you is the way we're measuring is through retention of team members. We can also see how many are engaged with the programs. And so if you look at the attendance, it may be a financial well-being with our 401k match. How many people are participating in that? It may be a communities of interest where we engage with them on a quarterly basis in a broader group, but much smaller groups on a monthly basis. So we're constantly tracking that attendance, but we're seeing it on the back end for the retention piece because they do feel supported. You also talked about what are some of the obstacles you're facing that as we've rolled it out, and some of that is just communication, right? I think, Stacy, you made a great point about how do we change the stigma to mental health. And we noticed in our restaurants, we put up a poster that said, it's okay not to be okay. And it had a QR code that took them straight to lots of benefits and support out there. They weren't as comfortable going up to a poster. And we found that out very quickly. We needed a more discreet way to get some of the information and some of those benefits to our teams. So I think we've had to really pivot on what is the communication like and how can we get it to more individuals in a timely fashion. So we've used text messaging that we can do throughout for our 60,000 team members. We've been able to engage through some portals and other ways to bring awareness, but continuing to figure out that communication piece, I think is what we're continuing to focus on.
I love that. It's okay not to be okay. I love that expression. That's great. Stacey, how about you?
Yeah, we are creating what we're calling a Wellbeing dashboard, which is a wellness and engagement dashboard. And again, for our population, I think it's really important. We're looking at everything as the intersections between turnover or leave of absence status, like those traditional measures, even looking at our claim status and increase and decrease and the volatility of claims on some of the mental health claims on anxiety, depression, our LYRA utilization as an example, which for me is actually an indication of the destigmatization and utilization of the tools that we have over time. We'll look at those claims values and look at how they're increasing or decreasing. So we're taking a pretty data-centric approach in the measurement of what we're doing, as well as we use a voice of the worker good job score tool to gain engagement feedback. And I think some things that really resonate that Erin said is, even in our own population, the stigma around accessing care is very high, because if you are a social worker or you are a psychologist, do you feel like you yourself have the permission to access care? Sometimes the answer is no, like you're supposed to know what to do. So it's interesting dynamic sometimes within a mental health organization. There's actually not a stigma, but an expectation that you wouldn't need that help yourself. So what's helped us is sharing stories. I've shared a lot about my personal story. January last year, my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. I've shared with that story with my organization and how I've navigated her diagnosis and her treatment, and how I have encouraged my own family members, my girls and my sons and my husband to access care through LYRA, because we all need support during Jocelyn's journey. Our CEO has shared that he's accessed counseling services, so I think sometimes that really is important, that aspect of leadership sharing, and they themselves or their family members or whomever are finding success. And I think what's interesting about that model is people choose their own adventure. And sometimes we've even leveraged, if someone really is struggling in leadership, they can access confidentially coaching assistance for free through the tools. So it gives us a lot of options and levers to pull for people to access wherever their comfort level is. And I think that to everybody's point, everybody has a different journey. And even in my own family, in our journey, everybody kind of needed a different level of support and care. So I think offering different tools, but being clear about what those are and then demonstrating the utilization of those tools, I think is really important.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing your personal story, and we wish your daughter all the best. But I think that's a great point that you say is getting leadership at the top to share their stories and share the fact that, you know, they also, you know, may be struggling, or someone in their family, to be able to break down those barriers for people to feel comfortable to start to have those conversations is very critical. Jared, how about you?
You know, like one thing that I would say is, firstly, I agree with Erin and Stacey, and I think that retention is one of the best methods you can use to really determine the impact of it. But I also think like looking at employee engagement surveys is what we do, and looking at what's the level of employee satisfaction, looking at productivity, like what is productivity like, are flexible policies such as telecommuting and those kind of things working, and then also looking at the turnover rate, which I think is also important, and being able to compare yourself against your competitive set. So we do a lot of we're a university, we're very innovative, and we also do a lot of samples. We'll get a lot of data to really look at like what's happening within the market, not only within what's happening within the university, but what's happening around the university and the area around it, because there's a huge business, a really big business population.
And it's interesting. Yeah, we also look at employee engagement as one of the key factors. You know, from and is anybody, a lot of the employment engagement surveys that are there are a little more traditional questions. Is anybody utilizing or adding wellness and mental health questions to their employee engagement surveys? Has anybody done that in the space that you're aware of, or is this? I think it's a definitely an area of opportunity.
Starting, Connor may have some given their kind of their area of focus, but one thing that we've started to leverage, one of the biggest tools that we've utilized, is this mechanism around self-compassion. It's been clinically shown to be the best off-ramp for things like compassion fatigue, which in our population is a very huge issue. So we've been probing and asking some pulse surveys, Kim, on, you know, are you utilizing, you know, self-compassion in your day-to-day life? What are the barriers to doing that? Where do you struggle with the 3-step process of self-compassion? Because what has happened during COVID is we've talked a lot about self-care, and spa days are amazing, but they are not going to really help you regulate in an emotionally dysregulated environment.
Absolutely.
So self-compassion is a self tool to really create more emotional regulation in all aspects of your life. And so to your question, like we started the early stage, kind of what are the leading indicators that if people are applying these tools effectively, and then and getting people to reflect, as I do that, am I feeling less burnout at the end of this week? So getting people to learn, apply, and reflect has been really valuable for us. And trying to understand what's working and not working versus waiting for purely lagging metrics, like turnover, even though that is a solid way to also, you know, show true value over time, and financial impact for sure.
I think if I could add, because Stacey, that sounds remarkable, and I think part of there's a lot of importance in being able to provide feedback to a person that's participating in some program about how they're doing, and if what they're doing is actually making an impact on their day-to-day life. The way that we think about engagement and measuring success of a program is on functional outcomes of people that are actually using them. So, of course, you know, looking at things like retention and engagement, other sorts of things are important, and of course, there's direct correlations with other sorts of metrics that everyone's interested in terms of ROI and other sorts of pieces, why that's important. But when I think about looking back and saying, is program XYZ working? And frankly, it doesn't really matter which program you're talking about. It could be a online therapy program or a meditation app or whatever. How can you measure the functional progress that person's making? And what I mean by that is that person finding it easier to get out of bed and get dressed in the morning? Are they finding it easier to get their kids dressed and off to school, and they're not so worried about coming into work, and they're not feeling like they're burned out all the time. And again, it doesn't matter what they're struggling with. It doesn't really matter how they're working on it. The fact of the matter is most people working on something are doing it because they want to function better on a day-to-day basis. So being able to track that, I think, is really important. One other thing, if it's okay, Kim, there's a sort of general theme with what Aaron and Jared and Stacey all brought up, was this concept of I guess it's cultural change. It's sort of instituting a cultural change across your organization, and you all work for really large organizations, and that's much easier said than done. And Aaron, you gave an example of the QR code, and you really won't believe this, but 24 hours ago, I was sitting with a group, and I was helping folks get registered and set up with a program, and I'm sitting in front of a big, room full of people in front of a poster that has a QR code, right? How many people signed up? Not many, right? Because they didn't want to walk up and take a photo of that. Now, when we left, and we left that poster by itself, and we kind of put it in a place that was a little bit more of a normal, we're walking by the QR, more people were signing up, and we were able to track that. But I guess the point is, I think we're trying really hard in our industry to destigmatize and to create avenues for people to come into our space, but there still is a lot of stigma. And so thinking creatively about how to communicate safety and confidentiality to people is really important. And I think the last thing I'll add on that, that I've seen a lot of, and I'm sure you all have seen a lot of this too, is if you can't assure or guarantee privacy, if you can't assure that when I log into this app, Aaron's not going to see my information, people aren't going to participate. And most programs work like that, but a lot of people don't realize they do. So it's about communicating that out and helping to make sure that this is a safe space. And those programs really are designed to help people kind of feel and do better. So
tying into that, Connor, is there anybody that's, how are you making people feel comfortable with that? Like, is it communication? Is there a best practice that you're doing that will kind of allow people to have that trust? Because you're absolutely right. That's such an important part. Is we get the question all the time, well, if I do this survey, do you know it's me? Is it confidential? And even though it might be a third party, people are still going to question, right? So we communicate, but are there any other best practices around how do you communicate that and make people feel comfortable?
I don't want to hog I don't know if others want to jump in on this. I'm happy to answer, but I don't know, Jared or Aaron or Stacey, if you had a thought on it.
Go ahead, Connor, and then I'll go after you.
Okay. I'll use the safe answer, which is, I think that style of communicating that to people varies depending on your staff and what they're comfortable with. But I think the key that I've seen is just continuity. It's continuous. It's making it very clear in every email and every text and making it clear in an app that they're using, making it clear that nothing that they say or do within this app, within this program, with this counselor is ever going to return. That can backfire, by the way, because it looks a little bit defensive and it can look a little sketchy. And in an area, or I should say in an era where nobody trusts anybody when it comes to their data, nor should they, that can sort of backfire. But I think it's all about just continuous reminders to folks. And over time, the culture changes, but it does take time to actually establish that. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, and I would agree. Those reminders are important. I think, Kim, you also asked, what does it look like for communication and some of those best practices? Stacey mentioned it earlier, but I think it's the vulnerability and the storytelling. So with leadership, but we actually have team members that will raise their hand and say, please tell my story because I want to help somebody else, whether that is they're dealing with addiction or somebody that has had, committed suicide that's they're near and dear to. And I think these stories that we're putting out in our newsletters with the resources that can help available, that is making people more comfortable that we are supporting that, and we're supporting these individuals and these teams with the resources. I think that storytelling is important.
I agree.
Now, I'll add on to that, Kim. It's, we went a little guerrilla warfare, which I think sometimes you gotta do that. And we sent postcards, with the Lyra QR to homes. Because let's face it, no offense, Jared and Connor, sometimes guys aren't going to be like, hey, I'm struggling. And so what we found is, like, if that gets to significant other or whomever, right, it ignites a conversation. Or if there's a kiddo struggling and maybe, dad that doesn't work for us knows about it and mom doesn't, right? And so we've had to just meet people where they are. And Connor and Erin, exactly. It's like lots of different vehicles of communication, lots of different modalities. And I think one thing about, providing it to dependents, we provide this to adult dependents. So their kids that are 18 years old, what we wanted to really try to convey is they don't even have to tell their parents. They can access care just with their parents' name, and that's it. And so we tried to lower the bar as low as we could to create greater access for more of our population, because that we felt like was going to continue to be an obstacle. If you have to go ask mom or dad for the thing and you're 19 and you're struggling, I don't know about you, I have 5 teens plus early 20s, like none of them will ask me for help on that level. They will ask me for their insurance cards every single time they go to the doctor. But they won't ask me if they really want help, right? Sometimes. So I think it's just thinking through the experience of the people that you're trying to help and what might be, if you have kids of your own or your spouse, like what's the dynamic in your own home and what would be effective. And so we crowdsource those ideas and use those ideas. I
think also creating a culture of care is very important, and making sure that people understand that your employees understand that work is a safe space, and that they're not going to be judged based on what's going on, but rather they're going to be helped. And I think that that's very important, because when people realize that they're going to be helped rather than judged, they are going to be a lot more. They are a lot more. They have a bigger ability to start sharing and to start saying, "Hey, I have a problem," and they don't even need to tell you what the problem is for you to refer them to get care and get the help that they need. But I think it's like when you have that safe space, that's what really is the most effective way, I believe, in getting that done.
Kim, I have just one other thing that I was thinking about as I was listening to folks, and I think, of course, stressing confidentiality and privacy and safe space and all those things are critical. The other thing that we did a little testing to see if there was some value here, and I think it coincides with what the research suggests, which is we know that probably the number one barrier to general healthcare is cost, dollars. How much is this thing going to cost me if I actually use it? And it's not always obvious to employees or students that that they have access to a free resource. Like when you said, Stacy, 25 sessions, by the way, that's amazing. I've not heard of 25 sessions for folks. I think that's so exciting. But a lot of people might look at that and say, okay, great, but how much does it cost me? Or is it a hit on my insurance? So I have to hit my deductible before I start getting things for free. And being able to convey to people that if it indeed is a free resource for them to access, covered by the organization, I think that's actually very important too, to get increased rates of engagement. I think that's something we should chat about.
Yeah, and I think, Connor, one thing we recognized, again, because our population is familiar with what that alliance looks like, that EAP, that can only be 2 or 3 sessions, you're really not going to find that alliance early on enough. So again, in our situation, we felt like it was really necessary, and we knew our clinicians, our psychologists and psychiatrists were going to question whomever we choose, so the bar was pretty high. We really wanted to make sure that we could really have an opportunity to build clinical alliance. And I was going to say, we talked about like ERGs and those populations. We know that people of color do not access mental health care at the same rate as those people in the majority. So I would also say, if you have employee resource groups or minority groups or representation inside of your organization, working through those groups, and again, like reducing the stigma. We had this with one of our resource groups in our DE&I committee, and we had a really active conversation about this because sometimes it's access to care, but there's actually a much greater stigma in receiving care in those communities many times. And so I think that's just something to know. If you're, listening to this, understand, if you didn't know that before, there is a level of judgment that comes with accessing any type of mental health care within sometimes various types of communities, depending on religion or ethnicity or country of origin. So just something to be cognizant of as you talk about these programs. And again, going back to getting so many different people inside of our organization telling their story. We have a patient story we do a town hall every Friday, which is a lot. So I will say it's a lot of work to keep that going. But we have a patient story every Friday, and we really are mindful of getting such a diverse group of people to share their story on that town hall. And sometimes it's employees, sometimes it's patients, sometimes it's community members, and I think that's been a help for us too in giving people the permission to access that.
Great. All right. So one thing, I think this is a great question, kind of continues on, but we talk about the demands of work and personal life balance, right? I think that's one of the things I know, and we have retirement homes and it's 24/7 business. It's, as you know, with the pandemic, it's been a challenge with recruitment, getting care. People have been working extra. And it can be a challenge to find that balance. So are there any flexible policies or programs that you have in your organization that you put in place to really help employees try to manage that balance effectively? And what results have you seen with those implementations?
So we use remote and flexible working hours to really give our employees the ability to have that balance. It significantly increases their ability to manage their personal life and professional responsibilities. And I know that that is something that a lot of organizations don't do, and a lot of organizations do. And it's become, I think, more of a talking point since the pandemic on is it the right thing or the wrong thing. And you play with that, and you have to find that balance between what works for the organization and what works for the employees. We also offer comprehensive family support programs, and we have a family resource center that provides information to families on things such as childcare programs and parental advice. And we also have a child care assistance program, which I think also sort of helps to really promote that balance. And then we have wellness programs as well, and it allows the individuals to really participate in preventative health, which I think is very important as well. And I think the results that come out of this are things such as increased employee satisfaction, employees who have access to flexible work arrangements. They've reported higher levels of job satisfaction, enhanced productivity, flexible work arrangements such as telecommuting or having 410s, things like that. They increase productivity because the employee is actually doing stuff at the time that they can do it, and they're not worrying okay, now I have to run out here on a Friday, but I can take this Friday off and actually get everything done. And I think going back to what I said earlier, reduced turnover rates. I believe that is that's an extremely important measure as well, because it shows that what you're doing is working for your population. And I think that you also have to look at, as I said, employee engagement scores to really understand, is it working, is it not working, what can we do, and how do we as an organization measure the results? And you can only measure the results by getting the information from your employees.
Okay, thanks, Jared.
And I would just add to that. So coming back out of COVID and thinking about just the flexible work schedule, here at our restaurant support center, we have about 500 team members, and we came back to a 3-2. So the flexible days are great because they can have 2 that they can work from home, 3 that we have them here in the office with a mandatory Monday, not always the most popular vote, that it is a nice day to get people in and I'll be here. But we've had to look, especially after this last year, as we continue to see that, people just still struggling, right? And we all are in different ways. And I think everybody has that, and continuing to focus on how do we help those around us. And so we've done some pop-up well-being days coming out of the holidays, some of the most stressful times last year. We came right back after the holidays and said, okay, in 2 weeks, you're going to have a Friday off. And we've done that several times throughout the year. We've also implemented some flexible work weeks. And so individuals here have 2 work weeks that they can work fully remote. So if that is things they need to do with their family, or maybe do some, work, handyman work at home, they can do that to be there. Or maybe they want to go on vacation and be at the beach and work a week and then take a week off. So giving them some of that flexibility. I think we haven't seen any drop in productivity whatsoever. We've seen that it actually has kept the teams more engaged. And the last thing I would add to that is just some cultural days. So just having them on the days that they don't have to be here on that Monday, the other days, having some fun things that they can do on those days that spark the interest to come into work. And so whether that be, yesterday was the turkey trot, and we went around the lake near our office and just got outside for an hour. There was around 50 people that participated, and they could just have some fresh air. Or if that is a fall festival, or it may just be Taco Tuesday, and we're giving, tacos in the restaurants to our team members, and just creating that sense of belonging is a big piece of that too.
That's great. Thanks, Erin.
I think oh, go ahead, Stacey. Did you want to? I don't want to jump in.
I think a couple of things. One thing that we recognized is just we have a lot of control over one thing, which is operational workflow. So doing simple things, we started doing 25-minute instead of 30-minute meetings, and 55 minutes instead of 1-hour meetings. And that's in clinic as well as people that are remote. And sometimes it's the simplest thing like that shifts. Again, normalizing the permission to take space, I think, is a big part of that. And I would speak directly to, there's a lot of HR people on this, dialed into this. And one thing that I've been beating the drum about pretty heavily in every aspect of my life, and I talk to, on my podcast a lot about, is, for those of us who have been in HR, for those of us that are Gen Xers especially, or older, we were never given permission to take space. And many of us would do a termination call and then be expected to dial right back into something else and shift the gear on having a conversation, whatever we were supposed to do. And so emulating that in our own team, because as the people team, if we're not demonstrating healthy mental health behavior, we can't expect anybody else to do it either. And so for my own team, if we do have to do an employee notification, or we have a challenging situation, we had an employee pass away this week, and one of my team went out and he said, I'll be back online in an hour. I'm like, oh, no, you are not. You're going to go home. I don't care what you do, but don't dial into anything. So I think when we take that space and give our teams permission, that really ends up rippling out to the operations and the leaders that we work with. HR changed their meetings to 25 minutes versus 30, or 55 minutes instead of an hour, or 50 minutes. Can we do that? So even though we rolled it out broadly, we lead by example. So I do think that's really important for our teams, because let's face it, y'all, it's been a tough 3 years for HR. Our teams have taken a lot of heat. There continues to be a lot of financial pressure, budget pressure, et cetera, across all organizations. So I think now more than ever, we have to really lead through example, I think.
Absolutely. Connor, you were going to.
Yeah, well, actually, Stacey, that's glad you went before me, because that's that was sort of along the lines of what I was thinking too, in terms of you used the phrase normalizing permission to take space, and I was thinking along the lines of historically, and I think even still currently, it's almost like a braggable thing for people to say, I haven't used a PTO day in 6 years, or I haven't. And what we're trying to get to is kind of like the opposite of that, which is use your days, because those days are going to keep you healthy. They're going to keep you right, and you're going to use them. And you kind of urging people to use them, I think, is what I tend to see more and more frequently now, which I think is super, super healthy, because it sends the message to employees, which is really clear. We care about you. We care about you, the person, not necessarily just you, the worker, which I think if you look back in time, it's been so focused on when you're here from 9 to 5, that's when we care about you. And then you go do your other thing. And people have learned their lesson as to why that's not the right way to approach things. But I think that's fascinating. Another thing that I would just add that I've seen some other companies do, and this totally varies based on the type of industry you're in and the type of organization you have, is the mandatory week off for everybody. I've seen some really large institutions do this, and I know it's not physically possible for many, but the stress and the anxiety and the worry that builds up when you're off, but everybody else is on. So, your emails your inbox is filling up and things are still happening. Your days off are not really days off. So if you can create a time where that's not happening and it truly is a time to decompress, it's a time to allow that person to balance their work and their life. I think that's something healthy that I've seen folks do when it's possible, of course.
Yeah, and I'll kind of tie into that, Connor. One thing that we did here, which actually went really well, is, we found, obviously, especially during the pandemic, trying to find time off was so difficult. Like, our leaders in our homes are just incredible individuals, and they're just always on. They always need to be connected with what's happening in the home. So where we could, from a geography perspective, we created buddies. So when one of our leaders was off, another leader from another home would actually be kind of support both homes, so that they could actually they could completely disconnect. And then when they went on vacation, they helped them. So it created a little bit of a buddy system so people could actually truly disengage and spend that time knowing that there's somebody there who, whether it's a discipline or a general manager, understood the business and could actually jump in and help and support the team if they needed. But it allowed them just to completely disconnect. And I can tell you, it made such a huge difference just to be able to, because we all know when you're checking your emails as you're going, you're not really on vacation, you're not really disconnecting, you're not taking that time for yourself and for your family. And it's so important. So it's a small thing that we did that actually made a substantial difference in people just feeling okay about actually going away on vacation and disconnecting. When they didn't come back to the 500 emails and the, things that went wrong, because somebody kind of had their back and was jumping in. So it worked out extremely well. All right, great examples. So I know we're coming close to our time. I've just kind of one last question I'd like to put out. So how have you integrated mental health and well-being promotion into your overall HR strategy? So, and really, what difference is that making in your organization? Are you seeing the support from the leadership in order to be able to make those changes in your strategy? Maybe.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think, we think about things, we're working to think about things more holistically, we use the word strategy, but like holistic approach. And so, just to give an isolated example, one thing we've started integrating based on what we were just talking about, there were some questions in the Q&A, like, what are some other things you can do? Getting people to take, I call it like the vacation buffer day. And it's something I've done in the last 10 years. I take vacation and then I block my calendar the day when I come back, again, to give myself the permission to say, I'm not going to work the day before, because that's what ends up happening. Right. But I think in a very simplistic way, as we think about the experience of people inside of the organization, and we're called the EXT, the Employee Experience Team. So I think that, by definition, that's our goal is, so we decided to start, we have a leadership development academy. And so we ended up partnering with Calm. And the reason why is that they have a lot of tools in their app, actually. So we deployed it just for leaders to start to utilize those different tools to start every meeting, whether it's a 2-word check-in or whatever it is. So it's really thinking about every aspect of every interaction, which can feel very overwhelming, that everybody has, but start with things like meetings. Can you shorten them? Can you start a meeting with a 2-word check-in? Can you get leaders to integrate some habits into meetings that are more, are really facilitating better sharing, a safe place, as Jared said, really feeling like the organization cares about them, and are you facilitating those in every interaction that people have with each other. So for me, it's about thinking about all those opportunities, our interactions where we can integrate mental health and well-being practices that are pretty simple sometimes, taking 2 deep breaths. It seems so simple, but to get people in the rhythm and being a culture that values mental health as a top priority. And so that's how we continue to evaluate what we integrate, what we implement, and what we support as a culture, and really walk that walk from top to bottom.
Right. Anybody else want to add on and what they're doing in their organization? Okay. All right. So I know we're getting close to the time mark. So I just want to kind of open up one last question, and it came in through our chat as well. Is there anybody who wants to share something that maybe an initiative that they tried that wasn't successful, and what did you learn from that, and what did you maybe do differently?
All right. I'm coming in.
Okay. All right, Connor.
I'm coming in.
Perfect.
And again, I think this hits on a theme that we were chatting about earlier, which is different things work for different people. And sometimes it's trial and error in figuring out what's right for your group. And I think probably the most common thing that I've run into when chatting about helping different groups find the right mental health resources for their team is trying to use their historic. Now, I'm so sorry about the dog barking, if you can hear that.
Good.
Is trying to sort of understand their understanding of what mental health support actually is. And if you look back, most people think mental health support is therapy, period. That's what it looks like. And now it's not necessarily the case. And so I have met with many folks who approached it in that way, set up, maybe it was an EAP, or maybe it was virtual counseling, or maybe it was an on-site, counselor for their team, and just people weren't using it. And it's only because it's not because it wasn't a great resource. It's only because their people did not want that particular resource. And so doing a little bit of homework and sort of surveying the employee staff and understanding what they were looking for, and then building a program around that helped to make things more successful. But trying to break through some of that existing knowledge of or thought that this is the way that mental health treatment works, so this is what I'm going to use, has been something I've run into a bunch when chatting with folks.
Yeah, Connor, I would agree. I think really being able to survey and hear from your team members about what they're looking for and what it means to them, I think makes a huge difference, because you can really cater to the resources that they're going to utilize, versus kind of sitting behind a desk thinking about what you think your team members want. Hearing directly from them makes a huge difference.
What I've also seen is that not relying on technology to provide the mental health care, but like realizing that technology is a good thing and it can be a tool, but like it's really those personal relationships. It's that personal interaction with the person. It's really understanding the person. It's something that technology is never going to be able to do because it doesn't have feelings. And I just think that's very important within organizations.
Yeah, I was going to add, I was at a very different organization before this, not a mental health organization. It was actually higher education, and in the trade space, and very male dominated, and very, the median age was like 48. And so we went down in flames several times on some of these initiatives. So lessons learned for me is came in and established really a well-being committee to get feedback. So we asked for broad feedback, but then we bring that back to the committee to gain really a 360-degree deep conversation about how to roll things out and where things. So that's been a lesson learned for me, because we fell on our face several times, learned, fail forward. We're not afraid to fail. And we pilot things, here and do a good job of getting feedback from those pilots. But, I think I've said this a million times to the board, if we get 1% change, it's 1% to the positive. And so if you're not spending, if you're going all in on huge dollars, but some of these things, and to Jared's point, this is about human connection. Some of these things don't cost anything. And so the 1% move is 1% to the positive. I'll take it all day. And just setting realistic expectations with your C-suite and your teams. Progress is progress. It's going to take time.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to share? All right. Well, I know we could talk, this topic is something we could talk about for hours on end. So Stacy, Jared, Aaron, and Connor, I just want to first thank you so much for your time today and for sharing all of your personal stories and incredible experiences and the great things that you're doing within your organizations. It's just wonderful to see the support and the focus on mental health and wellness, because we know this is such an important part of our everyday lives. So as we leave here today, I just want to encourage everyone to continue to have those conversations and dialogue around mental health and well-being in your communities, in your workplaces, and with your families. It's so important. We talked about the importance of creating those safe space so people feel comfortable to talk, because that's the only way we're going to be able to understand how do we help and what do we need to do to help. So really, the things that you're doing make a significant difference in your organizations and in your personal life as well. So huge thank you to all of you for your time, and thank you for participating, and thank you for the audience listening today, and have a wonderful rest of the day.